There are two kinds of people in the world. Those that believe Jesus and those that don't. In John 10 and verse 10, he makes an astounding offer. He says, I came that they might have life and might have it more abundantly. In other words, Jesus says, if you listen to me, if you follow me, you will have the fullest, richest, most satisfying life imaginable. Do you think Jesus tells the truth? I do. And yet so many people, by their actions, betray their true beliefs, that he's not telling them the truth. That if you follow Jesus, you're going to miss out a lot of fun things. Go back with me in time 25 years. I was a young preacher then. I'm not anymore. I was also a thin preacher then. Hard to believe, but time changes as the years roll by. Living in Jackson, Michigan, I was the preacher for the local Church of Christ, and 2 or 3 times a week I went out to the prison there. Jackson, Michigan at one time was the home for the largest walled prison in the world. A lot of folks in Michigan run afoul of the law. Most of them had moved there from Ohio, but nevertheless. And in the congregation that we had that met behind the walls was a little fella by the name of Jack. And if Jack were to walk in here today, you'd instantly love him. He's just likable. He always had a grin on his face. Always reminded me kind of a jack-o'-lantern, but not just because his name was Jack, but he had 3 or 4 teeth missing, so it was always like a pumpkin that you would carve around Halloween. Jack had hair roughly the color of a pumpkin. He was like a tough little Irish ginger terrier. And Jack was always present at our services. You say, well, he had nowhere else to go. No, you could sleep in. You didn't have to go. But Jack was there at the Bible study, always paying attention, always listening. He was there for the worship. He would not sleep through the sermons like some would do, but Jack was actually paying attention. He'd gotten involved in some scrapes with the law that had to do with drinking. Jack was an alcoholic, and he'd get drunk, and he'd, like most people when they get drunk, he'd do stupid things. He was locked up for a couple of years. And he actually, unlike most of the people in the prison there in Jackson, he was from Jackson. He was a local boy. And he told me, he said, Chuck, in a couple of years, I'm going to get out. And man, when I get out, I'm going to come join your church on the outside. I can't wait. I said, Jack, you can sit right next to me. Love to have you there. I'm looking forward to it. Jack gets out in a couple of years after being in services every week. And sometimes it's difficult to get back into the world when you have a prison record. Shockingly, not everyone will hire you. Jack was a skilled carpenter, and he started working on building houses, and he had more work than he could handle. And unlike a lot of the guys and the girls that get out of prison, he was making money the first month hand over fist, flush with cash. And for the first month or 2, Jack was there every Sunday. He was there listening to the Bible lesson. He was there singing songs, paying attention to the sermon. And then one week, Jack wasn't there. Then the next week, Jack wasn't there. And then the next week, Jack wasn't there. And we called on him, said, Jack, we've missed you. Oh, yeah, some things have kind of gotten in the way. We've kind of gotten busy, and, but I'll be there. The next week, it was about this time of year. I remember because it was about 5 degrees outside in Michigan. Snow and ice everywhere. We get a phone call from Jack's wife. And you couldn't really make much sense of what she was saying. She was crying. The gist of which, Jack was on a 3-day drunk. Out of control. Didn't come home. And finally, when he did come home, he was so drunk he couldn't make his way up the stairs to his apartment. So they called us. Now I went over there with my friend that worked in the prison ministry with me, and we saw Jack sprawled out on the snow outside. I mean, he had frozen to death. Somebody didn't pick him up. We tried to pick him up, and he was slurring his words, and he couldn't say much. And we finally got him upstairs, and I learned something there that day. I was about 25, I guess, 23, whatever it was, and the guy that I was working with was about 75. He was a lot smarter than I was because he lived a lot more of life. And we got Jack up there, and we kind of put him in his bed, and we put the covers over, and he wanted to talk to us. And Brother Barker, that was there with me, said, Jack, Chuck and I will be back tomorrow to talk with you tomorrow. You're not in any shape to talk right now. And he wasn't. You ever try to talk to somebody when they're drunk or when they're high? You know, it's like getting in a wrestling match with the pig. It ain't going to work out well for either one of you. So we let him sleep it off. I'm sure he had a hellacious hangover the next day, but we came back and we talked to him. He sobered up, but that smile on his face was gone. And we started talking. He said, Jack, you know, the biggest thing you wanted to do was to get out of prison, to be reunited with your family, to have a job, to have a church family that loved you. I said, every single thing that we prayed to God that would happen in your life has happened. And now there's something missing? And I'll never forget, if I live to be 100, what he said. This is what it was. I can't face the prospect of living the rest of my life without drinking. He said, I've kind of figured if I'm going to be a good Christian and I'm going to be a good church member, then, I need to not do that. And he said, I just like drinking too much. I like getting drunk too much. And the prospect of not doing that is just too depressing to contemplate. I never saw him again. Ever. I want you to listen to something that happened in Jesus' life in Luke chapter 4. And that's what we're going to talk about in the remainder of our time today. Beginning in verse 14. And Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit to Galilee, and a report about him spread through all the surrounding country. And he taught in their synagogues, being glorified by all. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And he went into the synagogue, as was his custom, on the Sabbath day. And he stood up to read. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And all the eyes of those in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. Think of that sentence again. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, and to release the oppressed. But how many of us consider ourselves any of those things? Well, I'm not a prisoner. I'm not oppressed. I'm not blind. And that's the human condition. Here's the connection I want you to make. The only way that you're going to live that abundant life that Jesus promises is if you're honest with yourself about what's going on in your life. If you continue to lie to yourself, if you continue to delude yourself, I don't have any problems, I don't have any struggles, I don't have any addictions, you're going to limp through life. And you're not going to live that abundant life. You're going to live a mediocre and a frustrating life. And that's not what Jesus came to do. Christians sometimes are the most self-deluded people on God's green earth. Because we imagine, since we show up on Sunday to praise God, well, what could possibly be wrong? And yet, you know what you see in churches? You see divorce rates that are just as high as people in the world. You see addiction rates that are just as high as people in the world. There might be bigger problems with pornography among people in the church than people in the world, and on and on and on it goes. And here's why. Because on some level or other, the great majority of us are oppressed and in bondage to sin. That's simply the way that it works. The flesh is weak, from the least to the greatest. A friend gave me a book a couple of months ago, and it was written by someone that I was really familiar with, an English actor by the name of Russell Brand. Some of you, wish I had a picture of him. If you saw a picture of him, you'd laugh. He's kind of skinny and slinky, and he wears these he doesn't really wear men's shirts, he wears blouses. It's a blouse, and he wears leather pants. I have never had the body to wear leather pants, and plus my father's here, and if I'd have showed up in leather pants, I'd have gotten a slap upside the head. What are you, Jim Morrison or something? No, but Brand looks like that. He's got hair like Louis XIV down his back. He's an actor. He's a singer. He's been in all kinds of movies. Get Him to the Greek and Arthur. He's in the Arthur remake. He is a national treasure in England. He was married to Katy Perry a few years ago, if you know her. I Kissed a Girl. Anyway, I don't want to get into that's church, okay? But the point is, Russell Brand is a dude. He's famous, okay? He's rich. The girls like him. He's funny. He's witty. I was not prepared for this book. The book is entitled Recovery. Brand is a drug addict. Brand is an alcoholic. Brand said he's had addiction issues with things everywhere from money to food to sex to relationships. He says, you name it, and I've messed it up. I've made a wreck of it in my life. This is maybe the most honest book I've ever read. I don't know that I've run into too many Christians that have held up the mirror to themselves and said, this is who I am. Because sometimes we play games. Most of us have taken a shower today. We put on deodorant, and some of us put on cologne. Look at me, for crying out loud. I've got socks. They have a moose on them, okay? You don't think there's a little bit of vanity at work in an aging fat man? There is, okay? I want to look good. We all do. But we want to put our best foot forward, right? That's what we want to do. What I wasn't prepared for in this book were two things. Number one, Brand's take on the 12 steps. He goes right down the line and gives the 12 steps. Just listen to me now. He does it in a rather profane way, okay? So if you're kind of shocked by swear words, don't read the book. Listen to my sanitized version of it, okay? That's better. Because he's a little earthy in his language. But number two, he just puts it all out there. I was pretty knocked back. Wow. Listen to what he says at the start. Do you have the sense that something is missing? A feeling in your gut that you're not good enough? That if you tick off some action, whether it's eating a Twix, buying some shoes, smoking a joint, getting a good job, that you'll feel better? If you do, it's hardly surprising because we live in an age of addiction where addictive thinking has become almost totally immersive. It's the mode of our culture. Consumerism is stimulus and response as is designed for life. The very idea that you can make your life all right by attaining primitive material goals, whether it's getting the ideal relationship, the ideal job, a beautiful Berber rug, or 40 quid's worth of smack. This underlying idea, if I could just get X, Y, Z, I would be okay, is consistent. And it's quite wrong. Addiction is when natural biological imperatives like the need for food, sex, relationship, or status become prioritized to the point of destructiveness. It's exacerbated by a culture that understandably exploits this mechanic as a good way to sell Mars bars and Toyotas. In my own blessedly garish addiction, each addictive pursuit has been an act of peculiar faith that this action will solve a problem. That sound familiar? If I can do this, everything will work out. If I get this, everything's fine. Is it? Did it work out? Remember Dr. Phil, the bald-headed guy on television? And how did that work out for you? That's a fair question. What happened? And Brand had to look at his own life and say, none of this has worked out. Not one single decision I've made. In John chapter 8, verses 31 through 36, the gospel records an incident that took place between Jesus and the Jews. It is not a particularly soothing exchange because Jesus tells them the truth. He doesn't tell them what they want to hear. He tells them what they need to hear. And one of the quickest ways to get in trouble today? Tell the truth. Telling lies is a lot safer initially. It'll cause you to lose your soul. I wouldn't recommend it as a long-term strategy. But as an easy way to go ahead and go along to get along, telling lies works. That's why people do it. Telling the truth, it's a bit stickier. Listen to what happens in John 8, beginning in verse 31. The problem is the Jews take issue with Jesus' insinuation that they are not free. Never mind the fact, if you know their history, they've been in bondage through most of it. Good grief, they were in bondage in Egypt. They've had problems with the Philistines, with the Midianites. Later on, they would have problems with the Assyrians, with the Babylonians. Then they would have problems with the Greeks and Alexander's progeny. At the time that he was speaking, they were in bondage in their own land to the Romans. It would be easier in Israel's history to find the times when they were free than when they weren't. But, as Ronald Reagan said, facts are stupid things, okay? And the thing of it is, Jesus tells the truth, and they don't want to hear it. John 8, beginning in verse 31. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him. These are the ones that believed him. Forget about the ones that don't believe him. These are his friends. He says to the Jews who had believed him, if you abide in my word, then you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are offspring of Abraham, and have never been enslaved by anyone. How is it that you say that we will become free? Jesus answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The Son remains forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Do we need to be reminded of this? Man, we know it. I mean, when we quit playing games and tell the truth, we know it. Sin enslaves. We start off take something like drinking. I mentioned my friend Jack. There was a first time in Jack's life when he picked up a glass and took a drink for the first time. Initially, Jack held on to the bottle. You know what ended up happening? The bottle ended up holding him. That's the way sin works. We know that. All you have to do is look around the country. Do you know last year, some 58,000 people died of opioid addiction? I mean, our country's just awash in a sea of drugs and opioids. There are things out there like fentanyl, kill you. Just kill you. This year, over 60,000 are going to die. The prospects are, in the years to come, it's going to grow and grow and grow until it will be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people dropping dead of drug addiction. Anybody stop to ask the question, why? Why? Why is this happening? Why are people throwing their lives away? Why are they short-circuiting their futures? Why are they breaking the hearts of their family members and friends and loved ones? Well, usually they're trying to fix something. What did Brand say? He said, in my own addiction, listen to this, each addictive pursuit has been an act of peculiar faith that this action will solve a problem. That's what we think. This will solve things. And it doesn't. It just makes things worse. Listen to what else he said about step one. He said, I took step one when I admitted I was powerless over my addiction and that my life had become unmanageable. That I didn't have control, no matter what I said to myself and others, and that it was getting worse. I knew I had no way out, and I knew that fear and shame were things I didn't want to face, but I couldn't avoid them any longer. That I would be able, through my will, to bend the world into making me feel all right somehow. You ever heard that? I'll fix this myself. Will you? No, you won't. And he said someone came into his life named Chip Summers. And after making fun of that for being a ridiculous name, he said, Chip Summers looked at me and he said something that I wasn't really ready to hear. He said, he told me straight, you are doomed. If you carry on using like you are, in 6 months' time, you'll be in prison, a lunatic asylum, or the grave. And while I was shocked, I knew he was right. Brand says, you might not be addicted to crack and heroin as I was. And the above might seem comfortably alien. So I should tell you, I've worked step one many times with food. I'm powerless over food. If I start eating chocolate, I don't know when I'll stop. With sex, if I make sex the panacea, the salve to this pain we discussed, I will lose control of my sexual conduct and I'll end up in more pain. Or work, or my relationship. In fact, now I work this program and therefore every day in a 360-degree fashion. I've decided that I have no power at all over people, places, and things, and if even for a moment I mistakenly believe that I do and act as if I do, pain is on the way. If there's something in your life that's causing you a problem and you're aware of it, I bet you've tried using will, crystals, hypnotism, and pills to placate it. My suspicion is they haven't worked. My experience is they never will work. Oddly, counterintuitively, in our culture of individualism and self-centered valor, it is by surrendering that we begin to succeed. It is by admitting that we have no power that we finally begin the process of accessing all the power that we'll ever need. You know why that's true? Because it comes from God. That's where Bill W. took the idea. That's what the whole recovery movement is based on. Listen to this and see if this doesn't sound familiar. Matthew 10, verse 39. Jesus says, whoever finds his life will lose it. And whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Here's what Jesus is saying. If you go out and you make your entire existence about yourself, you're dead even while you live, even though you don't know it. If you decide there's more to life than simply doing every single thing that you want to do and satisfying every lust and every desire that you have, if you decide maybe there's more to life than me, maybe there's God, maybe there's my family, maybe there's my friends, maybe there's the church, maybe there's others that I can help, then you start to find your life. And that's the only way that it works. That's reverse engineering. Make it about yourself and you'll lose. Make it about someone else and you win. Make it about Jesus and all the pieces of the puzzle start to fit. And you take him away and it doesn't fit and it doesn't work. Why is it that we have such a hard time believing him? He says, I came not to spoil your fun, not to end the party. I came so that you might have life and might have it more abundantly. And we're thinking, no, I can't imagine not drinking. I can't imagine not getting high. I can't imagine not looking at pornography. I can't imagine not making money the be-all, end-all of my existence, or whatever the addiction is. What the addiction is not really the thing. That's a symptom. The cause is what it is driving this behavior. And the cause is what Jesus is trying to get at. It's selfishness. It's about me, myself, and I. But the person that understands who Jesus is and what Jesus is offering, they're the ones that really know what life is about. Brand goes on to say this. He says, step one means you can change. It means surveying the landscape of your life, your family relationships, your working life, your sexual behavior, your eating. Listen to this. Your use of the phone, drugs, and alcohol, the way you spend money, and asking, am I happy with this? Am I happy with this? Is this how I want to live? If there is a behavior or problem that lurches out garishly, some glaringly obvious looming catastrophe that this surveillance revealed, then it is here that you can take to step one. I am powerless over this and my life has become unmanageable. Brand says this unmanageability concept is interesting too. And as well as the most obvious interpretation of chaos and disorder, there is a deeper, scarier meaning. The first aspect in my case was plainly observable. Unpaid debts, hospital visits, jobs lost, relationships lost, friends holding up their hands and walking out of my life. I was creating chaos. Does this sound familiar? You know, people that you love, and like, you can't be around us anymore, okay? We can't take it. You end up in debt. You end up in trouble with the law. Have you ever been to the hospital and woken up with a bracelet on your wrist and you didn't remember how it got there? I have. Okay, I know something about this. That is not the answer. This is the answer. The Jesus that you will find in this book is the answer. He's telling you the truth. Whether you're bright enough to understand it or not. And doing it our way, it only ends badly. You ever go into a movie and you kind of know where this is going to go even in the first 5 minutes? My wife is like the queen of that. I hate watching a movie where it's like, he did it. I'm like, how did you know? I mean, he just walked in. She knows. I mean, I'll be there 2 hours. I'm like, now, who was he again? I wouldn't know. This is the way this movie is going to end. If you continue to do things your way, it's going to end in pain. Eckhart Tolle said this, addiction starts with pain and ends with pain. And it does. Here is a clinically accepted breakdown of the cycle of addiction. 5 steps. Listen to this. The 5-point guide. Number 1, pain. Why do people start using? Because they're in pain. They don't fit in. Their family's broken. They have a bad self-image. Blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is. It's pain. It's something in you, in me, that's dissatisfied. We want it to be different. Number 1, pain. Number 2, using that addictive agent like alcohol, food, sex, work, dependent relationships, whatever, to soothe and distract. I remember right now where I was the first time I drank and got drunk. I remember how it felt. I'm 54 years old. That happened when I was 17. How long ago was that? Lifetime ago. I still remember it. It's that powerful. You know why? Because alcohol is basically an anesthetic. It numbs. Some people like that. Step 2 is using something. Step 3, temporary, listen to this, temporary anesthesia or distraction. You're having problems, you're unhappy, you go out and get high, you go out and use drugs. You know, if you're a gambler, you go out and bet the paycheck on the horses, whatever it is. Does that help? Temporarily. While you're drunk, it helps. You don't remember that. While you're high, it helps. What happens when you sober up? What happens when that wears off? It's still there. It hasn't gone away. It helped you temporarily. You know what the Bible says in Hebrews? It mentions the pleasures of sin for a short time. Why do you think people sin? Because it's fun, okay? I asked a guy one time, why do you drink? He said, because I'm thirsty. Okay, well, good answer. How long does it help? For a little while. And then it goes away. And guess what? Your problem's still there. Now you got 6 more of them to deal with. Number 4, that's the things to deal with, consequences. You go out and break the law. You go out and break God's law. And my friend, you haven't seen trouble yet. My father did something really, really valuable in our upbringing. I was always more afraid of him than I was afraid of my teachers, of the coaches, of the principal, of the police. Because there was an unspoken assumption, boy, if you run afoul of the law, if you go out and act a fool, you're going to deal with us. I put that same fear of God in my 2 boys, okay? You got to understand, when you run afoul of the law, when you break God's law, there are consequences. And when I see these parents today, these helicopter parents, that they step in every single time their son or their daughter does something and they protect it and they remove the consequences, I'm like, you are ruining this kid. Because sooner or later, they're going to get into some kind of trouble and you can't fix it. Okay? Consequences, number 4. Number 5, shame and guilt leading to pain and low self-esteem. It's a cycle. I'm in pain, so what do? I use something. Well, what happens? Temporarily, I feel better. What happens after that? Consequences and bad ones. Then what happens? You feel horrible about yourself. Here's my question. Is that the abundant life that Jesus promises? That's the life that the devil promises, okay? Because he's here to lie to you, to steal your joy, and ultimately to destroy you. And you can't find any better prescription for that than that cycle of addiction. One more scripture. We're about ready to quit. James chapter 1. I want you to look at it. There's nothing new under the sun. God has been telling us the truth about this all along. And in James chapter 1, the Holy Scriptures offer a progression into chaos, despair, and destruction that sin leads us into. James chapter 1, beginning in verse 13. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. Now look at verse 14. But each person is tempted when he or she is lured and enticed by their own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. That's the progression. God's trying to keep us away from it. Did you ever think, be honest. We're in church. I think a little bit of honesty would probably help. Any of you ever grow up and you thought your parents' main goal in life was to make sure you didn't have any fun? I went through a couple of years of that. I was convinced that God had put my mother and father here to make sure that I had the lowest amount of fun possible. I look back at that now and I'm ashamed for having been so stupid. It's kind of like that Mark Twain story. Mark Twain said, when I was 18, I thought my father was the most ignorant man I'd ever met. And by the time I was 23, I was amazed at what he had learned in 5 years. If you don't get that, go home. You'll get it on the way home, okay? Sometimes we imagine our parents to be kind of like God. They're just here, no. My wife and I got a puppy the other day. She's a rescue dog. She was on the streets, and she'd been in a kennel at the Humane Society for a month. Great dog. We had her for a week. We've spent a lot of time telling her she's good and patting her on the head and hugging her. We spent a lot of time, no, you can't jump on the table. No, you can't eat off the stove. No, you can't drive the car. No. I mean, and sometimes that's our view of God, isn't it? God just, no. Here's the thing. Anything God says no to us about, it's for our benefit. He's not trying to steal your fun. He's not trying to spoil the party. He's trying to make sure that you live life the way you were meant to live it. That's what this is about. I love what Jesus says as he reads from that scroll of Isaiah. He said, I've come to give release to the prisoners, to release you from oppression. And so many people around us are oppressed by sin. But it doesn't have to be that way. We said at the start, there's two kinds of people in the world. Those who believe Jesus and those who don't. What about you? Do you believe him? Maybe the next follow-up question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to start listening to him? Are you going to start following him? I'm not trying to lay a bunch of preacher jive on you, okay? It'd have been just as easy for me to sit at home. I didn't have to come up here. I came up here to tell you the truth. And this is the truth. I've lived on both sides of this. When you follow Jesus, life will be worth living. And when you don't, life really isn't worth living. That's how stark a contrast there is between those two ways of living. One is worthwhile, and the other, you're eventually going to get tired of it and just say, what's the point? In just a minute, we're going to stand and sing a song of invitation. We've already had one opportunity to kneel at the cross and to pray. But maybe you're here today and you're bearing a burden. Maybe life has been just unbelievably difficult for you because you've been trying to replace God with something else. The Bible has a word for that. It calls it idolatry. And it never works. Only God can fill that void within us. Not drugs, not alcohol, not sex, not money, not shopping, not social media. God and God alone. And if you're tired of looking for those answers in all the wrong places, come to the right place. Come to the cross, to the one that loved you enough that he gave his life so that you might live, and that you might live the abundant life. Today, if the invitation of Jesus is calling you in any way, we invite you to respond. Won't you come as we stand and sing together?